Hey everyone! So recently, shortly after my channel's 1-year anniversary, we hit 1,000 subscribers. No, sadly, I am not making 1,000 sock plushies. However, I did spend 1,000 minutes making them, if that's anywhere near as cool. For those of you who don't math, that's 16 hours and 40 minutes. No, sadly, I did not sit there for 17 hours straight making them either. Instead, I divided it among the 4 days of my Memorial Day weekend. So I know it's not much compared to what I did for 100 subscribers, but I'm really happy with the quality of what I was able to create, and I got some nice tutorials filmed because I know you guys like those videos. So, in the true nature of someone who is relatively good at math yet incapable of doing it when it actually counts, I counted these plushies and I recounted them and I recounted them, and I only have 80. I was supposed to have 84. Yeah. When I divided up the 16 hours among the 4 days, I thought I would have to work for 4 hours and 5 minutes per day. That's not correct, so I did have to add some extra time at the end when I realized. After turning on my 60s pop playlist, I was ready to begin. First, to come up with ideas to make, I looked through an old notebook of mine that I used to write video ideas in, which I haven't looked at in a long time. Yeah, sorry about that upload schedule thing we have going on. I currently have 5 videos in the works and ready to be edited, with more coming, so I promise that's going to change, and for real this time. Anyway, back to aesthetic notebook clips. After I'd found a couple ideas that I was willing to make, I decided to sort my fuzzy sock collection to see which colors I had a lot of. I had a good amount of white that I could use, as well as the lower quality, less normal colored socks that I was probably never going to use if I didn't do it now. So the first plushie I chose to make was a puffin. I was planning to base this design off a pigeon plush that I'd made a couple years ago. Fun fact, it was my very second original design. My first was a whale, and my third was the chicken that I made a video on, which is probably the worst quality video on my channel, yet the second best performing. Thanks, YouTube algorithm. Now, about recommending people my favorite video of mine. Anyway, making a puffin would be a great way to use up the white scraps I had for its facial and belly markings, and I also had a pair of low quality black socks that would work well for the body. I filmed a tutorial for the puffin, so that's why I have the tutorial angle and backdrop for this section. I cut my favorite parts for this video and won't be going too in-depth about the making process, so the proper tutorial will be coming out sometime in the next couple months. Something to note, since the sock was black, I used white marking threads to mark sewing lines, which I stitched in a shape similar to the pigeon plush, but with a larger head. The completed shapes of both the plushies are pretty different, and that's mostly due to the shape that's achieved by pushing around the stuffing inside the plush. Since I have so much scrap fabric that's too small to be used, I started cutting it up into shreds and adding it to the centers of my plushies. It's not the softest proper stuffing, but it's still pretty undetectable if you surround it with fiberfill. And the next time I make a pillow, it'll help cut down on the amount of stuffing I need. For my scraps of white sock fabric, I was able to cut a large white piece, which I pinned and whip stitched onto the plush. I'm always kind of scared whenever I pin into sock plushies that the head of the pin will slip through the loosely woven fabric and I'll lose it inside the plush. That's never happened to me before, and I hope it never will, because that sounds like a painful experience to get it out. Anyway, I did the same thing with the eye patches. I felted a beak for the puffin, which ended up coming out a little too large. After gluing on some eyes, it was finished. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it came out, aside from the large beak. As I just mentioned, I've been cutting up scraps of fabric into stuffing. Here I'm sorting through my socks and cutting off any bits that can't be used. Out of all the fabric scraps I've accumulated, fuzzy sock scraps make the best stuffing, followed by fleece and felt. The rest of the fabrics I use for sewing aren't that great, the worst probably being my ultra low quality muslin, and the very nice quality heavyweight cotton I made a baseball cap out of. Whenever I had some downtime between plushies, I was usually cutting up scraps while contemplating the next plushie and resting my brain. Making these things is actually kind of stressful in a way, because even though it's pretty forgiving to small mistakes, it's not very easy to correct big ones, and contrary to how it seems, I don't have an infinite amount of sock fabric to redo things. After much contemplation that completely warranted the lengthy amount of time I just spent giving myself arthritis, I decided to make a gray rhino plushie. When I made the rhino tutorial here on my channel, I didn't have any gray socks, so I decided to make my rhino blue. After making 3 more blue during my 100 subscriber special, I decided I liked gray rhinos better and made a gray one. At the filming of this video, I'd given it away and kind of wanted another, so another I made. Something that I've gotten a lot better at, especially in the plushies I'll make in this video, is making these 4-legged animal bodies. Since I first came up with the technique in my pig plush tutorial, I had a lot of trouble making them neat and also sit flat, so I'm happy I've gotten that down. So to anyone who had a bit of trouble following one of my tutorials involving the technique, I promise it gets better after you've made too many of them. Again, the white horn was a great use of my scraps. And I didn't add a tail to the plushie because I both forgot and didn't feel like digging through my yarn stash for the bulky white gray skein that I needed to use up some time. And with that, in perfect timing, the first day of the challenge was over. So these were the plushies I was able to get done today. Honestly, I thought I would be able to get a lot more done than I actually was. But I'm proud of what I did. It's not my best work, but I'd say it's pretty decent. I honestly can't believe I did this pretty much every day for like a month. Back in August or September or whenever that was. I really had it down to like a science back then. Like I was really efficient and I was really able to pump those things out. I would work in batches of like 8 or 10, but it would still take me like 2 or 3 days to complete those. And they were not as detailed as these. So yeah, at least I got a tutorial filmed for this one. I think it came out pretty cute. The only thing is the beak's just a little bit big. But if you look at it from the right angles, it's not bad at all. I think for tomorrow I'm going to do a bit more planning, just so that I know exactly what I'm going to do, and hopefully get a little bit more done. I do have several ideas for new plushies, so maybe what I'll do is every day I'll make one new one, then maybe an old one or a less complex one. So yeah, see you guys tomorrow. The next day I made a plushie that I've been meaning to make for literally months, but procrastination. It would use up one of the white socks I had, as well as the scraps of black from yesterday's puffin plush, so I figured it would be pretty perfect. This cow plushie is similar to the other 4-legged animals I've made. It starts with a base body that I'm sure you guys have seen me make so many times. To kill some time, and also because it literally bops, let's talk about the music in this video. A couple of the songs were composed and recorded by my friend Carter, who also has a channel that's music-based here on YouTube. I'll link it in the description as well as in the iCard. The rest of the songs you're hearing are stock songs from the YouTube audio library, which I'll link in the description box in case you're interested. Okay, for the -3 of you who are small YouTubers like me, or just need stock music for whatever reason, I'll give you some tips I really wish someone told me back in the day, a year ago. So in my opinion, the best place to look for stock music is the YouTube Studio audio library. It's all free, most of the time doesn't require crediting, though I sometimes do it anyway because I feel bad, and it's very good quality. You just have to dedicate a couple hours to sift through it to find songs that fit your channel best, because a lot of the stock songs are too intensely one emotion, and not more subdued. I usually have success in the cinematic category. You may be able to find music on other sites, and I did used to use Bensound and Purple Planet, which are both great, though I just like to use YouTube Studio better because there are no paywalls and it doesn't really sound super stock music-y. Anyway, that was a very fat paragraph out of the script. YouTube, please monetize me for praising your wonderful music. The head is a bit different than other plushies in a similar style. I squared off the toe of the sock, and with the seam facing outwards, I sewed the bottom edge closed, leaving a space for turning. This head was meant to be a bit more boxy than other ones I've made. Then I cut the toe off a pink sock and stitched it onto the face for the nose and the mouth. I also made cute little horns out of yellow sock fabric and sewed them to the head, which is definitely one of my favorite parts of the plush. I loved the cute little horns so much that I made another horned animal later in the video. From my leftover scraps of black, I cut circular patches and pinned and stitched them on, thankfully without getting any pins stuck in the plush. Lastly, I superglued on some eyes and tied yarn knots on the face for nostrils. I think the plushie came out pretty cute. So after making that cow plushie, I'm feeling kind of brain dead because it took a lot of mental effort. So what I'm going to do next is, this is the base of a jellyfish that I made a couple years ago, must be like 2 or 3 years ago now. As you can see, I didn't finish it. I didn't add the tentacles coming out the bottom because procrastination and whatever. So what I'm going to do now, a couple years late, is I'm going to make those tentacles, I'm going to crochet them, and then I'm going to sew them on and finish this plushie. and thus I'm obliged to finish this plushie, not because I would have ever through my own free will, but because I have time to fill, and I was sick of staring at socks and figured it would be better to stare at yarn instead. So here I'm looking through my stash of light worsted weight yarns and picking out any colors that I think will go well with the jellyfish base. When I'm picking colors, I tend to say, hey, this is a nice accent color, and pick out only accent colors, and my piece ends up being a complete mismatched mess. I tried my very best to resist that urge on this one, and was only mildly successful. In order to add some visual interest, I decided to crochet the tentacles in spirals. So first I made a bunch of chains, then I crocheted an increase in every stitch, an increase in every other stitch, or an increase in every 2 stitches in the chains. By the time I got to the end, I had a nice spiral which varied in curliness from the others. I think I made about 8 of them. In case you are interested in making a jellyfish too, I won't be making a dedicated tutorial, but I could tell you how I made this one. It's essentially the heel of a sock, but I sewed around in a scalloped pattern. I cut a slit in the bottom for turning, then stuffed it and sealed the gap. Fun fact, it was originally meant to be an octopus, but it didn't work out how I'd envisioned it, so I decided to turn it into a jellyfish, until I procrastinated it for several years. Once I'd crocheted all my pieces, I slip-stitched them all on, being careful to make sure they couldn't be easily pulled off. Then I hid the end of the yarn in the plush. Here's how it came out. For all the time it sat in my closet forgotten, it didn't come out bad at all, and it wasn't as painful as I'd made it out in my mind to be. I'm happy I was able to get it done. And one last thing, I added the yarn loop on top to hang it from. Okay, I'll be completely honest with you, I can't quite remember the point at which it switched from day 2 to day 3. I think it was during crocheting the octopus tentacles. I suppose I could go back to look at the dates on the clips, but I don't feel like waiting a literal half an hour for iMovie to load. Here I decided to make a goat plushie because I was thinking about the new Minecraft update in which they added goats to the game. You're not seeing me film it as a tutorial here because it uses techniques and shapes I've already covered in other tutorials, so instead please enjoy these pretty camera angles while listening to an absolute bop of a song that's probably a lot better than me repeating the same processes over and over again. I tried really hard not to make this script too repetitive. I hope it paid off. Alright, in like the last 30 seconds of this section, let's quickly go through how to make the plushie in case you're interested in making one for yourself. I'll basically be referencing various videos of mine that will explain to you in detail how to make each part of the plush. So probably the easiest thing to do is watch my rhino plush tutorial and follow those steps, except making it in white, adding little horns which you'll be able to see in my cow plush tutorial once it's released instead of the rhino horn, and embroidering on a face with black yarn. In the future, I may release some video that has better, easier instructions for making these 4-legged bodies, but for now, the rhino video is probably your best bet. The embroidered mouth may be a little bit difficult, but you can see how I'm doing it in this clip pretty clearly. The goat's probably my favorite piece I've made in this video, maybe even to date. I didn't have much time left over, so I decided to make a little yellow bird plushie. I pretty much followed the same process I did in my 100 subscriber special, except a couple things which I'll point out. Instead of using yarn knots, I used my normal flat-backed beads, which I superglued in place. I wasn't able to finish the bird in time as the timer went off right after I did the eyes, so I continued it the next day. And on the 4th day, I realized my math error in dividing up the time and added 20 extra minutes to the timer. I started out by needle felting the beak for the bird, making it small and cone-shaped for a more cartoonish look. Making this bird was kind of strange, because I hadn't made a bird in so long, yet I'd done so many that I still remember perfectly how to do it. It was weird. And I'm very happy with how it came out in the end. I decided that the last large project of this challenge would be to make a sushi set. Again, there will be a tutorial coming out on my channel soon, but I'll just briefly explain how I made them now. Essentially, all the sushi pieces were made out of rectangular shapes cut from the leg of the sock. They were then sewn, cut, and turned, so the shape of the sock really isn't used to your advantage in this design. After stitching the piece closed, a white one and a yellow one can be stitched together and wrapped in a black piece of sock fabric. After that, I made the same shapes again, but in pink instead of yellow, and sewed them together like before. I'm using a lazy, modified version of the lather stitch that provides a clean separation between the pieces, while still making a strong seam. For the salmon, I stitched white lines of embroidery thread on an orange piece using a long back stitch. Then I stitched it to the rice piece in the same way as the others. Lastly, I made 2 sashimis by making a shape slightly longer than the ones I'd been using before. Other than that, they were made in the same manner. So there you have it, a bunch of cute little mini sushis. I've made both needle felted and crocheted sushi, so I'm glad I can make some fuzzy sock ones as well. I had around half an hour left of the challenge, so I decided to make the Pokemon Wooper just for fun and also to use up an old blue sock I had. I was not expecting to finish it, and I didn't, so after the challenge I did a little work on it. However, I still included it in this video because I like how it came out. There's not really a ton to say about it, and I feel like this script is getting very sparse, but that's okay because literally no one watches to the end of YouTube videos anyway. While making Wooper's purple gills, my timer went off and the challenge was finished. Overall, I am super happy with what I was able to create. I feel like this challenge really boosted my creativity because I was forced to make things even when I didn't have a clear-cut idea or knew exactly how to make something. Across the screen, you can see images of everything I made. The goat is definitely my favorite, followed by the cow. Just a reminder, though I've said it too many times, most of these plushies will have tutorials on my channel coming out in the next couple months. If you don't want to miss that, feel free to subscribe for more fuzzy sock plushies, crochet videos, sewing, and whatever else I feel like doing. Thanks so much for watching till now, even though the script kind of died at the end, and I'll see you next time!